Welcome to Proof of Ergo, episode 12. I'm James Kever. Every crypto out there has some kind of mechanism to settle transactions and write blocks. This is a beautiful innovation that makes it possible for blockchains to be decentralized. And while some blockchains are more decentralized than others, that mechanism, also called a consensus mechanism, defines how the particular blockchain will run. For Bitcoin, and up until recently, Ethereum's consensus mechanism is called Proof of Work. Cardano and post-merge Ethereum use a protocol called Proof of Stake. Ergo's consensus mechanism is like Bitcoin's in so much as it's proof of work and requires miners to settle transactions and maintain the blockchain. The algorithm Ergo uses is fundamentally different than Bitcoin's. Ergo uses an algorithm called Autolykos, and that's what we'll be discussing today. Now, Autolykos can get very complicated, especially for non-developer types. So to help explain this algorithm Ergo uses and what's going on under the hood, I've invited someone who keeps coming up in all the Autolykos information out there. He goes by Wolf9466, also known as Wolf O and Oh God, a Pet, And not only is he a subject matter expert on Autolykos, he wrote the original Monero solo miner. He wrote an NVIDIA miner, and he's also figured out how to control voltage for AMD's GPUs, allowing miners to use way less power without affecting hash power. Wolf, I am honored to have an OG like yourself on the show.
Thank you.
First, a little background on yourself, as you have an incredibly interesting backstory. You're self-taught and doing, frankly, impossible things with GPUs, which are graphics cards. How did you get into all of this?
Long story short, I did operating systems development from scratch from about 12 to 17. Then from there, I found cryptocurrency. I messed around with it for a bit, and then I saw the Monero miner, the original CPU miner, and it was pretty terrible in the fact that it was very slow. I just kind of had to fix it, and so I did until somebody paid me to stop.
All right. Pretty cool. So Autolykos, now this is a pretty technical topic, and we'd really like to dumb it down so the average investor can at least have an idea of what's going on. But maybe we should start first talking about a couple of concepts, like a hash function and its output. When we hear the word hash function, hash power, are these all the same things? I mean, what's important to know about these terms?
A hash function is basically just a calculation you run. You take an input and it produces an output. Now, what you need with those things that are best to understand about a hash functions are, there's no shortcuts. You cannot get to the end faster than actually calculating the hash. There's no way to pre-compute an end result. Further, any change, even a 1-bit change in the input, will produce a vastly different output. And this output is always statistically random.
All right, so another concept we need to understand is epochs and blocks. Can you start by explaining what these are and why they're important?
A block contains transactions, and this gets added to the end of the chain. Every block has a reference to the previous block in it, and that's what creates the chain.
Blockchain, and what about epochs? Nope, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was about to say, can you repeat the rest of the question?
Yeah, epochs, like what? I know the answer, but for our audience out there, like what is an epoch exactly?
An epoch is a period of time measured in blocks where the difficulty adjusts. It's a window, and if the last certain amount of blocks, I don't remember off the top of my head the exact number, but if they took, on average, more than 2 minutes, the difficulty goes down. If they took less than 2 minutes on average, the difficulty goes up. And this way, it self-regulates how many blocks come per minute.
Yeah, this was a big deal when Ethereum first merged because all of that hash power came over to Ergo until that difficulty went way up, and then they took off, and
they got stuck high.
Yeah, it wasn't pretty, but the developers were on it, and they did an Ergo improvement proposal and corrected that. Moving right along, do you think it's possible for you to walk us through how the Autolykos algorithm works?
Yes, I think so. The first part of Autolykos is, in a very fast implementation, it makes sense to generate a very large table in memory because that is simply the fastest way to compute it. If you're doing a verification, you only need to do one, so you can skip the table. Anyways, every 2 minutes a new block appears in the network, and that means you have to generate a new table. Before you can mine, you must finish this. After you're done, then you begin hatching. You use the Blake hatch function and a lot of the memory lookups, and these are combined together to produce an output that's basically statistically random. If that number is less than what is called the target, then you have mined a block. The target is the opposite of difficulty. If the target goes down, that means it got harder. Because you are trying to find a number that's lower than the target. So if it goes down, obviously the lowest target would be 0, and you would have to have exactly 0 to... So, yeah.
So in comparison to Bitcoin, right, with Bitcoin and how that proof of work algorithm works, like you've got all of these different computers trying to guess a sequence of numbers, right, and the winner gets the block and gets the reward. How does Ergo and Autolykos compare to that?
Ergo and Autolykos are basically the same. It works on the same mechanism. The only difference is that the function used to create the random output is different.
Sorry, I missed that. The function used... Oh, the function...
To create the random output, yeah, is different.
I see. Where do mining pools fit in on this? I mean, how does the mining pool win the block and earn rewards for the miners?
Well, I think the best way to understand it is to understand how one miner might mine a block. They would simply mine to their node, and the node would provide work. They would attempt to solve it, and if they get a block, they submit it. This gets broadcasted out on the network. Now, what a pool does is it allows you to work towards a block and then get paid for how much work you did. This works basically because you can give them a fake artificial target that's lower, and if they keep submitting answers, they really are mining. You can prove that they really are mining. And at some point, someone is going to find a block, and at that point, everybody gets paid.
I see. Now, Autolykos is ASIC resistant. What does this mean, and how does it achieve this?
ASIC resistant means that it is very costly to make dedicated hardware to do nothing but mine Ergo. And it does this by using a large amount of memory to perform its hash function, or its proof of work function. Because of this, see, you can't just use any old cheap memory. You have to use very fast, very modern memory, and that's a large part of what is expensive on GPUs. So if you make a dedicated circuit for mining Ergo, then you're going to have to include this memory, and that's going to drive your costs way up.
All right, now this one I'm really looking forward to because we kind of discussed this a little bit offline. How and why is the Autolykos algorithm unique?
The Autolykos algorithm is unique in that, unlike ePath, it mixes a little bit heavier compute along with its memory lookups. Because of this, it uses more of the GPU somewhat than ePath would. You might notice with ePath, you can clock the core very, very far down, and it won't affect your hash. It's all memory. On Ergo, it's somewhat similar, but the level at which you start losing hash rate is very much higher than it would be on ePath.
All right, Wolf, what are some of the limitations of Autolykos?
I mean, it's a proof of work function. It does what it needs to do. It's sort of like saying, what are the limitations of this knife when I'm cutting celery with it? I mean, it does its job, and it does it well. There's not really any limitation other than the fact that, I guess, I mean, the maximum target is 256 bits, but I mean, if you're mining faster than that, your computer is made of something other than matter and occupies something other than space.
So say Ergo gets huge, and I think we all know it's going to. What will it take for ASICs to optimize Ergo mining, and is this even possible?
Yes, it's always possible. However, the amount of benefit that they will get is a lot lower than it would be if the algorithm was completely just core computation. Further, because of the memory usage, it drives up the cost of this dedicated hardware as well. What it will take for them to actually do this is just the right incentive. They will need a high enough price, and they will need deep enough market depth so that they're comfortable saying, okay, if we throw millions of dollars into making these things, we'll probably get it back.
Yeah, it's such a complicated topic, one I'm sure a lot of non-technical folks may struggle to understand. But Wolf, from a developer's perspective, what would you say is the most important detail about Autolykos people should walk away with?
The generation of the table in memory is probably a lot more impactful than you think as a developer, because you think that you're mining for 2 minutes every block roughly, but you're really not. That table is going to take at least a few seconds to generate, and when you have to do it every 120 seconds, it matters quite a bit.
All right, so we've seen two versions of Autolykos. So far, when we've mentioned Autolykos, we've really been talking about Autolykos 2. And I'm curious, well, what was wrong with Autolykos 1, and who really has the power to make changes to this algorithm?
Well, I wasn't around for a lot of Autolykos 1, but I have heard of some of the changes that were done. One of them was a vulnerability, well, not really a vulnerability, but a shortcut where they didn't hash the final value after doing certain math operations. And because of that, you could calculate only some of the math operations, just enough to do the comparison with just enough bits so that you could pass, but you were able to cheat some of the calculations. That is no longer possible.
All right, so then who can make changes to Autolykos 2 if they wanted? Who has that?
That's a bit of a complex question, but technically, all it takes for the technical part of it is that for miners, the majority of miners do agree to a fork. But if all the people using it, if all the people accepting it, as money for goods and services say, we don't like this change, well, they're not going to accept your new forks, so it'd be dead in the water. So it kind of takes everybody working together.
I see. Now, for those out there who'd like to understand the Autolykos algorithm more, they want to understand it better, what are some resources you suggest?
I would recommend probably reading the reference documentation and an implementation in code side by side. I find that they use a lot of math terms that I'm very unfamiliar with, although I've never been to college. But yeah, I've been very unfamiliar with it. So when I look at the code, I go, oh, that's what that does, kind of thing.
Yeah, it amazes me that you're not formally trained, and yet you are a genius about all of this. Switching gears, though, before we run out of time, what do you like about other mining algorithms? I mean, what could Ergo maybe implement from other algorithms to make it better?
I think that better depends on your goals. And one of my favorite other algorithms, for example, is RandomX. Not because it is better, for example, than Ergo's proof of work, but because it solves a different problem. What they want is a very strongly ASIC-resistant algorithm that is also CPU-bound. So what they did was that they made it heavily dependent on the one thing that is the largest, most complex part of CPUs today, the branch predictor. So a branch predictor basically says, are we going to jump here or are we not? And it doesn't know that answer until it has executed all the instructions that lead up to it. So it kind of guesses. And if it guesses wrong, it's got to just undo all that work and try again. This is the big hit. And because of that, CPUs are simply the best thing to mine it with.
All right. Now, proof of work mining has been described by some as a waste of electricity. Do you have any thoughts on energy use of the proof of work consensus mechanism?
I do. Because, well, everything we do with electricity could be described as a waste of electricity, but what we think of is this task that I'm performing worth the power that it's using, that it requires? And I believe that a decentralized currency that isn't under the complete control of a few people is worth the power that it takes to secure it. I don't think anybody has taken a look at it as saying, is this worth it? They were all comparing it to, oh, how much does banking use? Well, it's better than banking.
Yeah, I mean, how much electricity do hot tubs use? How much electricity do washing machines use? How much electricity does the Visa network use? It really irks me personally when I see all of this hating on proof of work. But yeah, we're just going to have to kind of, write our politicians who are legislating, because, and the truth is, you just cannot really shut down proof of work. I don't know how you could possibly do that.
Yeah, you really can, because someone somewhere, as long as there's money in it, is going to do it. Someone's going to provide that need.
Absolutely. All right, so Ergo is a smaller cryptocurrency, and there's been some chatter about its vulnerability to a 51% attack. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on this, and can anything be done to mitigate this risk?
Well, cryptocurrencies, due to the difficulty mechanism and due to how people behave in terms of profitability, they are very self-regulating. The reason is that network hash rate is directly proportional to how much or how valuable the coin is. Because the more the price goes up, the more profitable it is. This means miners move directly to the coin and start mining it. So, the more valuable your coin is, now the harder it is to attack. If your coin is not worth a whole lot, then of course, it wouldn't take much to take over, but nobody's going to want to do that because there's not much money in it. And as there becomes more money in it, it gets harder and harder to attack.
Yeah, it does kind of seem like the situation. All right, well, I want to ask you one last question. This just kind of came to me. We didn't talk about this offline, but it's kind of an ongoing debate in the community. Proof of work versus proof of stake. Do you have an opinion on which one is better?
I mean, proof of work to me is slightly better than proof of stake in the sense that more people get a piece of the pie. I believe that it's heavily better than proof of stake in the fact that, for example, exchanges cannot manipulate it. A lot of people store their money like traders on exchanges, and if they have a ton of everyone's coins, what's to stop them from voting using those coins? I mean, you can't really stop them. They have them in their wallet. And because of that, I think that proof of stake is kind of a dead end, because as long as somebody is holding somebody else's money, you've got a problem. With proof of work, I mean, you could say the rich get richer because they can buy more hardware, but at least normal people can buy some hardware and they have a chance.
Right, and I often hear proof of stake advocates say, everyone has the ability to participate, but I always am thinking in my head, everyone who has the money to buy into it, right? Because proof of stake is kind of a pay-to-play. And I have a lot of Cardano, so I'm not hating on Cardano, but...
To be fair, though, I mean, so is proof of work. You got to buy a high-end GPU to start mining this, and those don't grow on trees. However, with proof of stake, it becomes heavily slanted in favor of the rich because it's directly proportional to your money. It's not how much you're willing to invest. It's just how much money do you have? Okay, you have that much power.
It's one of my favorite questions, and I thank you for answering it, Wolf. I'd like to thank you so very much for all your time and giving us this information and coming on the show today. We'll be sure to include your contact information in the description of this video, and please feel free to reach out if you've got any more information to share.
Thanks, I will.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our show for you today. A quick reminder, if you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any of our content. We'd also love to hear your thoughts on today's show, so head on down to the comments and show us some love. And if you prefer to just listen to the show, an audio-only version is available on all the major podcast platforms. And finally, a very sincere thank you to Ergopad and their entire team for sponsoring this show. Ergopad is the premier launchpad for dApps and projects on the Ergo blockchain, and was the first to implement Layer 2 staking on the Ergo network. For more information on their services or how they can help your project launch on the Ergo network, check out ergopad.io. Thank you very much for checking out today's show. I'm James Kever, and we'll see you next time here on Proof of Ergo.